Going to call this meeting of the Plan Commission to order. Mr. Clerk, could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Buttry?
Here.
Ms. Bindum?
Here.
Mr. Fowle?
Here.
Mr. Fitch?
Here.
Mr. Hopkins?
Here.
Mr. Otto? Mr. Storr? Here. Mr. Trick? Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. Are there any changes to the agenda? No. No changes to the agenda. Approval of the minutes. We have minutes from the April 23rd regular Plan Commission meeting and minutes from the May 21st, 2015 regular Plan Commission meeting. Any motions to approve the minutes, changes to the minutes?
I will move to approve the minutes.
Both sets of minutes at once. We'll move them both at once. Moved by Mr. Fell.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Hopkins. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The minutes are approved. We have no communications before us tonight, and so we'll go to continued public hearings. Plan case 2256 PUD 15 and 2257 PUD 15, a request by Clark Lindsay for preliminary and final approval of a residential mixed-use planned unit development at 101 West Windsor Road in the R3 zoning district. Mr. Garcia.
Good evening. So I'm going to try and keep this quite brief since I presented on this case a few weeks back. But just as a refresher, this is Clark Lindsay Village submitted an application for both preliminary and final approval for residential mixed-use planned unit development. And this would allow for the construction of 3 one-story residential buildings, as well as additions to existing buildings on the site. So I hope everyone has been able to review the case, read the memo, and watched the previous Plan Commission where this case was discussed. And in these cases, you have the choices to recommend approval to the City Council. You can recommend approval with conditions, or you can recommend that City Council deny the request. The staff recommends approval with the following conditions, which we have a slightly different recommendation than the last time. We're just adding one site plan to the condition. So I'll just say that the staff's recommendation is that construction be in general conformance with the general site plan as attached in Exhibits D and E, and with the detailed site plan dated 5/15/2015 as attached in Exhibit F. So I'll pull up those plans just so you know what we're recommending really quickly. And then after I pull those up, that will conclude my summary of the report, and then I'm available for questions. Also, the applicant has, I know the architects here and some other folks who worked on this plan, and I'm sure they would be happy to answer questions as well. Okay, so the first site plan that we're recommending be in general conformance is this site plan. Let me rotate that for you. And this just shows the general site plan, so it shows where the additions to the buildings would be going, and then it shows where the 3 new residential buildings would go. That was not in our recommendation for last time, but we realized that the other plan that we recommended as part of the condition only showed those new buildings. So that's why we're making a slight change to the recommendation. Okay, and then this is the other site plan that shows a little bit more detail. You can see the width of the road, and you can see where the parking lots are going and all of that. So I will take any questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Trail?
The materials I have say that they're asking to be able to.
I'm sorry, could you use your mic, please? Thank you.
Sorry. See, I told you. The materials I have say that they are asking to be able to do a 20-foot, 25-foot wide road rather than 26, which is required.
That's correct.
But if you look back at the end of their materials, it actually says they're asking to do a 20-foot two-lane access drive that widens to a 28-foot drive with 2 lanes and parallel parking. So which is correct? It's 25 or 20?
The 25 is correct. The 20 was on their initial application, and then after consulting with city staff, they agreed to do 25 feet. And then the other would be 29 feet with the parking.
Okay.
So that's reflected on this site plan dated 5/15/2015.
Okay. There's a lot of additional parking going along Race. Is all of that new parking in support only of these 3 buildings, or is this being planned to support a more general parking for the facility?
That's a good question. I will defer that to the architect.
I would say, have to sort of preface all this, I'm actually in support of this. I think this is generally a good idea. I just have a couple of details. Part of it is my concern about is that usually the worst possible thing that you can do if you want people to be able to walk along somewhere is have a road on one side and a parking lot on the other. It's the worst possible scenario. Right now, there's a very short stretch along Race that's like that in the area of the garages. This is going to substantially increase that. So now you're going to have a quite long stretch with a long parking lot on one side and the road on the other. Right now, there's some green space between the walkway and the road, but that looks to me to be the kind of thing that's going to disappear in the future if they widen Race, which I have a suspicion is probably on some traffic engineer's map right now, since it's about the only way through to the new bypass they want to put at Curtis between First and Philo. So I have a feeling Race is probably very likely to be widened. And since apparently we're never going to get a stoplight at Vine and Windsor to make access to Meadowbrook easier, and there's an off-street bike path that terminates right at Race and Windsor, that looks like the sort of area that we would want to keep a pretty good profile for pathways like that. So my question is, were there other places that parking could have gone? Does it have to be there? That sort of thing. I mean, my concern was all that additional parking right along Race, fronting along Race.
Well, again, I'll defer to the architect on that. So I won't speculate as to why the parking was put where it was, other than to say I do know that they value their internal pedestrian connections. The internal circulation for pedestrians throughout the site. There's actually in one of these exhibits there is a pedestrian or a plan that shows where the pedestrian walkways are. But again, I'll defer to the architect on that.
Okay.
There it is.
I would like to see them not continuing to put, if you look at the rest of the entire site, other than that short section on Race, they do not have very much at all street-facing parking. Or when they do, like along Windsor, there's a pretty substantial buffer in between. But what they're talking about doing now on Race is putting it very close to the walkway. And if Race is ever widened in any way, it's going to start to feel like a very narrow space along there. And so I'm looking at is there a way to relocate the parking, or perhaps shift all the buildings a little eastward and be able to move the parking a little further into the property? Just because I really think, to me, one of the major walking, biking accesses to Meadowbrook is gonna, especially in the future, is gonna be along here.
Any further questions for Mr. Garcia? Mr. Storr?
Thank you. Kevin, with this slightly narrow entrance to the greenhouses, I was wondering how if they need to get moving vans or trucks in to move furniture on that narrow section, would that still allow an emergency vehicle to pass?
These plans were run by our Public Works and our fire and police, and they are,
They're happy with it,
they are, yeah.
and I am too.
Thanks.
Further questions for Mr. Garcia? Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Garcia. Brief summary of our process. The petitioner can make a statement and present evidence. We can ask questions of the petitioner. Other proponents of the petition may be heard. Opponents may speak to the commission and present evidence. They can ask questions of the petitioner through me. Others may be heard on the case. Additional comments from city staff may be allowed. And petitioner opponents may be rebut, but cannot present new evidence. And then we'll close the public hearing and discuss the case and may vote on the case. So, if you would state your name for the television audience.
Where's the camera? Ramu Ramachandran. I'm very happy to be here. I'm an architect, registered in the state of Illinois. I work in Chicago with Perkins Eastman. We have a strong practice nationally in senior living, and very happy to and proud of supporting Clark Lindsey. I also have 2 people with me from the Clark Lindsey staff. Our long-term Director of Environmental Services, Fred Lux, and we have Clark Lindsey's landscape architect, Brian Johns. We don't often have the pleasure of actually working with an actual registered landscape architect on many of the properties and clients that we work with. Clark Lindsey has one. I'm very proud of their buildings and grounds. I heard your questions, and happy to try and answer some of the stuff here. I think one of the biggest challenges that Clark Lindsey faces is lack of parking. And lack of parking in being able to accommodate the staff needed to support their residents. And one of the things that Clark Lindsey prides itself on is not charting on the actual ratios of the amount of staff to the amount of people, both in dietary services as well as all the amenities. And I think the biggest challenge that Clark Lindsey has now is shortness in the availability of parking for some of the staff. So what they've done is they have an agreement with the Urbana Park District in actually sharing the parking lot just south of the greenhouses with the Park District. And of late, the feedback that I've gotten and what I've seen as well is that Park District parking lot is being more regularly intensely used by Urbana residents and park patrons. So as time goes on, even though there's an agreement, there's stresses on that parking lot. So there is definitely a need to add some parking on the property. We looked at how best to meet the demands of the fire department and Clark Lindsey itself. And what we've done is provided for 2 dedicated driveway access lanes. Kevin, if you don't mind, I'll move forward. I think I'm going to go backwards here a second. So there's, if I'm at point on the screen, or might just point to your the papers that you're looking at. Each of the greenhouses has a dedicated access lane into a garage on either side of the greenhouses, and that's where we have all the deliveries happening, and staff access as well. So that ensures that if there ever is a moving van or delivery, that they're not actually blocking up the main road. The fire department really thought that was very beneficial. We're also working with Brian Johns on making sure that we are in the course of this development, it would be easy to add more, widen the road, so to say, inside the property. We got some significant feedback from the residents that they love the existing look and feel of Clark Lindsey and the woodedness of Clark Lindsey. So that was fundamentally the reason why we were approaching the city to have us be considered and allowed for a 20-foot wide lane to save as many of the trees as possible. So we conducted a detailed tree survey. We did and both a civil engineering tree survey as well as an arborist survey to determine the nature of the trees and whether we could save the trees. And after that extensive work, we've been carefully managing the location of the roads, working with Brian Johns to identify the trees that we can save in the course of doing this work. We eventually had the road go a little further out east into the property, but there was some pushback from the residents in terms of, how many more trees do we need to lose at this point in time. So we were doing all this to try to make sure that we minimize the impact on the trees and the grounds on Clark Lindsay. So we've even narrowed down the parking lot on the race side from a double parking to a single lane, so we can continue to keep a buffer of trees just to the east of the single lane, single parking bay and the drive aisle. Along with that, we worked with the city to make sure that we have a landscape buffer. I understand the comment about the amount of parking, but we've made sure that there is a buffer, and Clark Lindsay does do a fantastic job of maintaining grounds, pruning, growing the trees, caring for the trees, choosing the right kind of landscape. So hopefully these kinds of moves might help address your concern. We could also look, and I think we could definitely look at planting trees at the end of the parking lot in the islands to make sure that there is a little more shade and a feeling of greenery as you come up and down the sidewalk there at Ray Street. That's what I'd like to hope that helps and open to more questions.
Any questions for Mr. Ramachandran? Mr. Trail?
Could you do something as simple as place the spaces on the east side of the area that you're designating as a lot along Race rather than the west?
The concern there was the headlights shining into the apartments.
Well, with all that parking around, they're going to have headlights shining into the apartments all the time anyway, anytime anyone goes in and out.
Right. Just not wanting to exacerbate the problem, that's all.
There's also other areas of the property that you could use for parking, I assume.
Yeah, not without, in this particular case, nothing is without significant impact to the property. Just like we have community gardens on the Park District side, the further development of Ray Street actually into the property, or Burns Drive into the property, is going to take out a significant amount of current resident gardens that they're very attached to. That's why we tried to, minimize what we needed to do is what we call as development footprint, try to minimize it to the extent possible.
If you look at the site plan, if you simply moved the three buildings to the east somewhat, wouldn't you create more space for yourself to do parking and things like that that would have less of an impact on Race?
I think Clark Lindsay is, go back to your, so there's a detention basin on the bottom corner bounded by,
Right, but
That
there's
ring.
room before the detention basin. And not enough room to put another one of these buildings,
right.
but plenty of room to move, at least half the width of one of these buildings that way.
Yeah, I mean, the hope of Clark Lindsay is to, to ensure that their own land is maintained, to allow them to offer their best services to their residents, is to make sure that we are comfortable in the location of the houses. So we were careful in making sure that we don't intrude into the land too much to be able to either take out existing greenery or to take away their capacity for planning their growth in the future. So we were just being, balancing the two requirements. And there is a little nook of the Park District that actually enters into Clark Lindsay on its eastern boundary that limits just from the north, from the development from the north and from the south. It really limits what we can do in terms of how much space is left in terms of any development.
Well, I guess part of my point is that if you say, bunch more of the parking you want to add into one lot just south of the road you want to add, right? That almost becomes an extension of the current Race Street lot for the Park District. And, you know, that sort of, it impinges less on Race, and it leaves that, more of that, and it's a nice green area along Race there. And there's a nice walkway that I know people from from Clark Lindsay use to get to the park rather
Yeah.
than go out to Race
do.
and walk along the road.
Yeah. Yeah. And right now, we are maintaining the walk just to the west of the first greenhouse to be able to get people out to Ray Street. Would your concern be addressed by the way we could landscape the buffer? Would that help?
The current small hedge along where the garages are currently, it's nice. In fact, really right now, the nice part of it, in fact, maybe something that would, not that I'm in control of this in any way, but the one nice feature you have along there is those decorative lampposts with the flags. Part of my concern is that someone getting to the end of the bike path up on Race and Windsor, now when you look down Race, it looks like a nice place to walk, and it leads you right to the park. Plenty of green, it's nice and open. And in fact, those flagged poles are exactly the sort of thing you see in pedestrian walkway areas. Is there any way that in your site, in your construction, you could just extend that the rest of the way down?
It's a very good question. And Brian has been very active in working with the city. Feel free to come and join me, Brian. He's been very active in working with the city, and he's just obtained approval, I think as of early this week, to replace the current Cobra lights with a much better decorative and functional lighting fixture.
That's correct.
Yeah, if you could state your name very quickly.
My name is Brian Johnson. I'm a landscape architect with Clark Lindsay.
Thank you.
Yes, we, at our villas development, we would be using the same light fixtures. It's a down light LED. We could affix banners to it, similar to the others, but this would tie both sides of Burns Drive. That Race Street extension would eventually become Burns Drive so that we would have continuity through the street. This light is also similar to what's found on Philo Road and in the Pines development, the Atkins commercial development.
I'm sure it's actually nice, but the thing that I think is really conducive to when someone's standing there and looking down at those flags, regardless of the lights you're using or whatever, those flags along there create the real visual that here is a place, it's intended for you to walk. And to me, that's what we're in danger of losing if all these parking lots right along, it starts to look like, whatever, we're losing all the green along there, even if we put trees in and stuff. So even something as simple as put flags on the poles would create that for me. I still don't like parking lots next to roads for walkways, but.
That's a great idea. Yeah, and I think our marketing department will like that idea too.
Very good idea. I think we can definitely combine some tree planting with the lighting and the hedges and try to give you the feeling as you look down Ray Street. It's a great observation.
I realize you've researched. I realize they have expansion plans, and I realize they want to serve a larger group over time, and they don't. And believe me, I'm the last person in favor of putting more and bigger parking lots in. But I also want to keep that. I really think is going to be even more over time a gateway to Meadowbrook Park for many people, and I really would like to maintain as much as possible that character as a pedestrian corridor.
And that's a good observation, and that's our intent as well. And so in our development and getting our prior board approval, we presented this as parking in a park.
Great. Any further questions for the petitioners? Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else care to speak in favor of the request? Anybody opposed to the request wish to address the Plan Commission at this time? Anyone else wish to address the Plan Commission about the case? Hearing nothing, I'll close the public input portion of the hearing and open it up for discussion, possible motions, et cetera. Discussion. Mr. Hopkins?
Do we have the exact wording of what we're going to vote on? You alluded to some word change or something.
I wrote down, Mr. Hopkins, that the recommendation of city staff is for approval with two conditions. One is that construction will be in general conformance with the detailed site plan dated 5/15/2015 and shown in Appendix F, and also the more general site plan as shown in Exhibits D and E.
And that's what you want now?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I move that we
Move like you
send the case with those words, which I'm not sure are written anywhere else. That's what's not clear to me. To the city council with a recommendation of approval.
And was that for both cases, for clarification?
Yeah, there's two cases here, yeah.
Which is the
preliminary.
PUD and it's preliminary and final.
Correct, yeah.
And that already includes the change to the 25-foot street.
Correct.
Okay, so.
Moved by Mr.
So moved.
Hopkins. Seconded by Mr. Buttry. Just for clarification, the specific language is that construction be in general conformance with the generalized site plan as attached in Exhibits D and E and with the detailed site plan dated 5/15/2015 as attached in Exhibit F. So we know what we're voting on. Any further discussion? I think we're ready for a roll call vote.
Yes.
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 That motion is approved. Any indication of when this will go to City Council?
June 15th.
Oh,
I don't think he's
Mr. Trail, you didn't vote yet? I'm sorry.
Mr. Trail is here.
No, I'm sorry. All right, I jumped the gun. I apologize. But now the motion is approved. So,
It'll go to City Council June 15th.
June 15th. All right, thank you, and thanks to the petitioners for listening to Mr. Trail and making the assurances you did. Thank you. The next case we have is Plan Case 2258 M15, a request by the zoning administrator to rezone 1.36 acres at 401.5 and 403 East Kerr Avenue from B3 General Business to R4 Medium Density Multifamily. Mr. Regic.
Good evening, everyone. So this is a, This is a request to rezone a 1.36 acre parcel, generally located on the south side of Kerr Avenue, between Cunningham Avenue and Division Avenue. The parcels are currently owned by the city and are vacant at the moment. These are the same lots that are part of the same lots that were subject to a request for proposal in 2011, and at that time, Brinshaw Development and Homestead Corporation of Champaign-Urbana were selected as the development team to construct the subject of that request for proposals, which was the Kerr Avenue Sustainable Development. And that development team has currently devised a concept called the Highland Green concept. And the details of which are provided in the memo. And this is also the same development team that developed the Crystal View townhomes, which are located immediately southwest of these subject parcels. And the developer does intend to link the two developments as much as possible. The developer intends for this concept to be both an environmentally sustainable community as well as an affordable community, as the developer has secured Veterans Affairs Supportive Housing vouchers, abbreviated VASH, and these can be used to house veterans in need of supportive services. They have also indicated a desire to obtain home funds and low-income housing tax credits. And the Highland Green is intended to, or the current proposal consists of single-family homes as well as duplexes, several of which are adaptable and accessible. The proposed zone, R4, would bring the zoning on the parcels into conformity with the majority of the subject area, which is currently zoned R4. As you can see on the map, the area that is indicated with the blue line is the area in which the Highland Green concept is proposed. The two red parcels, which are the B3 General Business District parcels, are the ones that are the subject of this rezoning, and they would be brought into conformity into the R4 zone that is currently on the western portion of 401 East Kerr on this side. So we bring the entire development into conformity. The subject parcels are surrounded by single-family homes and largely single-family homes and vacant lots, and all of the nearby residential zones are R3, R4, R5. The comprehensive plan has designated this area as a mixed residential area, which is a very good setting for the R4 district, and the rezoning would help the city to move closer to many of its comprehensive plan goals. The Kerr Avenue Sustainable Development has also been mentioned in the consolidated plan, which was recently published, and as a potential tax credit project, which could create affordable housing opportunities, especially for veterans. And according to the first of the LaSalle criteria, through which we can examine the validity of this rezoning, we can look at how the existing and proposed districts are compatible with the existing land uses in the context of the area. And in this case, the R4 district would act as sort of an intermediary between some of the less intense residential zoning to the north and the more intense to the south. So in that case, it definitely checks out. The second measure concerns the extent to which property values might be diminished following the rezoning, and it's the assumption of staff that the proposed rezoning and the proposed development would have either a neutral or positive impact on land values in the surrounding area. The development as it's proposed is of very high quality, as can be seen through this development team's previous work at Crystal View Townhomes. It would be very similar, so we assume it would have a positive impact on land values. The next two criteria examine whether the benefits to the community outweigh any kind of a detriment that the landowner would incur, but in this case the landowner is the city, so it would be a land use which would be beneficial to the community, and since the city is the property owner, it would be beneficial to both parties. The next criterion concerns the features of the property that allow for different types of the current or proposed uses, and the R4 district is suited to the context as well as the proposed development would be able to house that. The final principle examines whether the current commercial zoning is a barrier to development, and it can be inferred by the fact that the two commercial lots there are vacant. It can be inferred that the lots are of a relatively low demand in terms of the commercial market, and in that sense they are acting as a barrier in a certain sense to the proposed residential development. It should also be noted that what is now the eastern portion of 401 East Kerr Avenue, which is the westernmost of the two parcels that are subject for rezoning, was rezoned from R3 to B3 in the year 2000, ostensibly to accommodate a commercial development that would straddle the previously zoned B3 parcel to the east and allow a commercial development that never, over the past 15 years, has not taken shape that would straddle both of those parcels. So in summary, the R4 zoning of the subject parcels is well suited to the surrounding context, and the zoning administrator requests the change to accommodate the proposed Highland Green development. And this rezoning is compatible with the comprehensive plan, the character of the surrounding area, and it would bring the city closer to achieving a variety of goals and objectives in many different contexts. And the rezoning is expected to strengthen the development team's application for low-income housing tax credits, which they will apply for very soon in July. And having the parcels zoned as residential will help them to increase the financial feasibility of this project. So with that in mind, the Plan Commission has the following options for recommendations to City Council. They can forward this case to City Council with recommendation of approval, or forward this case to City Council with recommendation for denial. Based on the evidence provided, staff recommends approval of the rezoning case. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Reddick? Doesn't look like it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And again, our procedures, the city, I guess, is the petitioner here, but anybody who wishes to speak in favor of the city's case may do so. Then opponents may speak, and others may be heard. City staff may make additional comments. Petitioner and opponents may rebut but not present new evidence. Then we'll close the public input portion and discuss and possibly vote. So thank you. If you could state your name.
Hi, I'm Aaron Smith. I'm the Executive Director of Homestead Corporation. As a partner in the development team for this proposed project, we're very excited about the possibility of this finally going forward. After we finished up our development of Crystal View Townhomes in 2010, we responded to the city's RFP for this project, and we were very excited about it, but unfortunately, due to lack of available financing, we've had to delay our progress on this project. But due to some changes and some recent developments, we've found ourselves ready to go forward with attaining the financing we need to complete it. And we're very excited about moving forward with it. And this is really just sort of a first step to that process. So I feel like Matt pretty well stated what the point of our request was, but if people would like, I can field any questions regarding the development itself or any questions you might have pertaining to the development.
Great. Any questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Feld jumps in.
I have just a general question.
Mm-hmm.
These are all single-family or duplex units?
Yes.
Why are some of them accessible?
That is a requirement of the low-income housing tax credit program.
Further questions? Mr. Trail.
Could you, since you developed the adjoining
Yes.
development, what have you learned from the prior effort that's being incorporated in this one to improve it, the concept?
I think the main thing we've learned has been related to some of the mechanical and energy efficiency features that we included with the Crystal View. On Crystal View, we did all geothermal throughout the site, and that was a fairly large upfront cost for us, and we've found since then that maintenance of the units has been quite a bit more intensive than we had originally anticipated. We're probably not going to do that and instead look at other energy efficiency measures instead of geothermal. But in terms of day-to-day management, tenant selection, things like that, We've had a very stable operation there for the last 5 years that it's been in operation. We'll be using the same management team that we use with Crystal View Townhomes since the sites are adjacent. They will be connected by a pedestrian pathway. The management team that we use at this site that's currently a part-time management team will go full-time so they can manage both the Crystal View site and the proposed site. And that team has been very successful. We've had no problems with them. So that's the main thing I can.
Looking at your site plan,
Mhm.
you don't provide for a lot of parking,
No.
which I actually like. I'm not
Yeah.
complaining about that. I'm assuming that you're assuming you're going to have fair possibility of fair number of bus riders.
Yeah, I mean.
Are you planning anything
I
along
would-
Kerr as a bus stop or anything like that?
I don't think we have anything planned specifically. I mean, there is an existing bus route. With Crystal View, we found that there's more than ample parking at Crystal View for the amount of cars that our residents actually have. And there's actually also street parking on the city streets that go through Crystal View, which is never used. Just the needs of the residents themselves, we found, we don't really need an excessive amount of parking on the
There
site.
really doesn't look like there's going to be a lot of street parking available along Kerr. It's really
Well,
not.
no, and like I said, I mean, we provided the street parking on the Crystal View development partially because those streets, as we originally planned the development, we were going to rededicate those streets to the city to be city streets. So part of that was wanting to provide some sort of on-street parking in that area, making sure that the street was wide enough to do that on one side. But we found that there's never really any use of the on-street parking in that area by the residents.
So you actually really view these two really as almost a single development?
I mean, part of our motivation for wanting to go with this development was the fact that it was adjacent to the site and it could essentially be an extension of that site.
Okay. Have you talked to CUMTD about bus facilities or anything along Kerr?
I don't believe we've made any formal requests with them, but it's something we'd probably consider.
I can give you a contact if you're interested.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions for Mr. Smith? Mr. Fell?
It looks like to the south of your site is pretty much duplex, single-family residential.
Mhm.
And you have, on your current site plan, you essentially have a driveway abutting their property.
Well,
with-
actually, there's a line of trees that goes across that south
Okay.
south end of that property.
Even so, having lived across the street from some place that had a dumpster that was emptied early in the morning,
Actually, all the dumpsters will be located on the western edge of the site.
okay, what are the two little black things down on your new driveway?
Let me look.
What I'm driving at is, have you given consideration to essentially on the eastern half of your site, essentially flipping your site plan north and south so that that new driveway is along Kerr Avenue instead of abutting some neighbor's property?
I believe as the drawing currently is, I think there is one dumpster shown on the little bend there, and another one a little bit further back on the eastern edge of the site. I think at this point, the exact placement of those is still in
Sure.
flux. We may end up, I have to meet with the fire department on Monday to review their ability to access the site in terms of the width of the streets and being able to turn around. We may still have to make some modifications to that drive. We may even have to reduce the proposed units by one in order to make some space for better access for emergency vehicles. So at this point, the exact placement of dumpsters is in flux. We could definitely make some changes to that if we need to.
Mr. Hopkins?
This is clarification from staff. My understanding of what's happening here is we are voting on a zoning change. We are not reviewing a PUD, we're not reviewing a site development plan. We're voting on a change from B3 to R4.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
It's entirely just the rezoning from B3 to R4.
Our,
so
our proposal was put forward in 2011, was approved by council.
Right.
We're really just looking to get the site in conformity for development
Right.
purposes.
So I guess I'm trying to be clear about what's actually before us to review, and what's been presented to us. In a way, it's sort of overkill, because it's really interesting to look at the details of this site plan,
Yeah,
which I've
it's
got
a-
ideas about too, but I think
It's a
that's...
point well taken. We're not voting on the site plan. We're not considering the site plan. It's just a straight rezone.
To a certain extent, we are. I mean, we
They
have
could
not
change
only
it.
a
They could
rezoning,
change
but
it.
a specific proposed use.
Yeah,
And
it is, excuse me, but it is not.
Yeah.
What we are doing is changing the zoning. They could pull out,
Yeah.
the city could pull out tomorrow, the zoning will be what we decide the zoning
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
This, we are not approving this in any way.
No. But I look on this as we have a proposed use for why it would make sense to rezone this.
I agree.
And so
Yeah, some
I at
discussions
least
about
am
it.
interested
Sure.
in asking general questions about why they believe this location is appropriate for this
Yeah,
kind of
that's-
use.
yeah.
That,
that's fine.
yes, I just want to be clear what we're doing.
Mr. Storr.
I think that the executive director invited the discussion as well. But I was kind of struck by the row of trees along the eastern edge. It looks a little bit like a century line. And I didn't really see a lot of, very much open space for, say a playground or, children to assemble and play. But the garden looks pretty, like it looks like a pretty substantial garden.
Yeah.
Could some of that be used, left as open space
I
instead?
believe there is some intention to have some open space and possibly some playground equipment in that area. Yeah. We do have playgrounds on the Crystal View site, which are quite nice if you've ever seen them.
Huh.
Yeah. But yeah, there was a desire to leave some open space as well as a pedestrian pathway in the site. We did reduce the number of units on that western edge of the site in order to accommodate some more open space. And if you've seen the Crystal View development, if you've seen the landscaping there, the use of the green space in that development, it's going to be very similar to what we're proposing here is going to be very similar to that.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Smith. Appreciate it. Anyone else wish to speak to the commission in favor of this proposal? Anyone wish to speak in opposition to this proposal? Sir, if you could step forward and state your name, please.
Hi, my name's Bill Scott,
All right.
and I came up here tonight. I had a little short letter to read.
Okay.
And then I seen this over here. This wasn't here last week. I wish it would have been. I would have taken it home and read it. It's got a lot of details in here I wasn't aware of. Part of it is acquiring some property or possibly acquiring the property. I own the property east and south of where you're talking about the trees. I own those trees. And I own all that street, Bar Avenue.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't realize it was even talking about acquiring the 2 lots directly east of where they're trying to get a rezone. So, I came up here, and I have a little speech, but it encompasses a whole bunch more. And you was talking about the trash cans. We own Bar Avenue, okay, all the houses, all the properties on Bar Avenue. The trash cans right now are within 50, 75 feet. We hear them all the time. All the people do. There's 6 houses up there. They're really nice houses. We take really good care of them. As far as the assertion by the city that the 2 properties east, the acre east, just sitting there idle, no, they're in long-term plans. All together is about 6 other acres up there, zone commercial, that we belong to us. All on Cunningham Avenue and Bar Avenue and down towards the ditch all belongs to us also, with the exception 1 house on the corner of Bar, and we're negotiating about buying that. So these plans been in effect for years, 30 more years. We've been acquiring this land for commercial development, and we want to develop it. It's not just sitting there idle. see what it is here. And the trees, you know, like I say, actually our lots go back farther than the trees. And one of the reasons why we have to put the trees back there and leave them back there, there's so many problems with that crystal view right now of people cutting through these houses and lots we have, and that's how we cure the problem. So I couldn't imagine that street surviving up here with one to the west and one to the north. They just couldn't do it. If you notice up there, we have a fence running all the way from St. Line Ditch all the way up to Kerr Avenue. That's how many problems we have. It's over probably 1,000 feet of fence up there. We maintain it. We bought it. And it's been up there, and that's how we survive up there. That's how Cunningham Motors survives up there. But neither of that. Anyway, I didn't realize this all was coming into effect tonight. And I guess what I'd ask is if you're going to maybe postpone it so we can get a little bit better idea of what's going on here. It's been like 30 or 40 years in development for us. We've acquired this property over 30 and 40 years. And we do have plans for that acre of ground. And we wouldn't be opposed to buying some of the city's property because that's prime business property. You got over 1,000 square feet, 1,000 running feet on Cunningham Avenue you could use. And there's only 3 property owners. That's the City of Urbana, and there's that mall, and Cunningham Motors. So you're talking about quite a bit of development could be up there. We would not be adverse to talking to the city about development up there, and certainly not residential. And certainly it wouldn't be good for Bar Avenue because they just couldn't survive. We couldn't survive. We've owned some of these houses, properties for 40 and 50 years. So I can read my little speech now.
But by all means.
Okay. I'll start all over again, but like I say, this wasn't up here last week. I wish it was,
Yeah.
okay? And we would have had a lot more people out here. I could have had the whole street of Bar Avenue out here, okay? But we didn't have that chance. Okay, my name is Bill Scott. I'm opposed to zoning on Kerr Avenue. I own the land bordering the east of it, the whole east, and all of it south, okay? I also own the land at about 425 feet of frontage on Cunningham Avenue. And if you include the other frontage from Bar Avenue to the St. Line Ditch, probably another 500 feet. So you're talking about over 1,000 square feet. That 2 acres is part of that, going to be part of that development. And I'd been nice if the city would, contacted me about it, but they didn't. We could have developed, we could have worked with it. I never talked to this gentleman at all, but he seems to know all about my property, about not being utilized. Okay, the city purchased this property about 10 years ago. And it was B3 when they purchased. They knew what the zoning was. They went ahead and purchased it anyway. Normally, if I've been a corporation, I would have came up here and maybe applied for the rezoning before I purchased the land. They knew what it was, okay? If the city rezones this land, it's going to devalue everything down there. It just devalues it. Reason to devalue, if I was able to keep my property and they wouldn't acquire it, then I would be required for fencing, lighting, sound deadening. Now I'm not if they develop the other 2 acres, but I'm required to do that. Not the developer, as far as I understand. We are required because we have the business zoning, as my understanding is, okay? But to me, I'm required to do that.
Yeah, we'll ask for clarification on that in a minute.
Yeah. Okay. So that puts the burdens on me on that. That's a lot of money, okay? Let's see. It's just not a good deal. It's not a good deal for the whole area up there because you're eliminating the whole street of Bar Avenue. I don't know if you folks have been up on Bar Avenue or not. Well maintained. All the houses are rented out. They have been for years. That we pay our taxes. It's very well kept. But it wouldn't be if this development goes through. There's no way. And plus, not only that, you're losing the opportunity for a big portion on Cunningham Avenue, over 8-10 acres that can be developed. I would not be opposed to that. I own about 6 acres up there, but certainly not 2 acres or my acre idle, not doing anything. No, that's part of that whole surrounding area. And that's why it was bought. Like I said, we've been buying this property for years, but we hadn't been contacted. So.
Well, couple of points. If they're researching your question about the requirement for.
Yeah, I think there is, because you have to put 6-foot fence
Probably,
and,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and lighting then, and you got sound in,
Yeah,
that kind
probably.
of thing.
But a couple of points, and then I think Mr.
Sure.
Hoffman might. This is, we're advisory commission.
I know,
And
I
then,
realize what you are.
Yeah, so the
I
council,
yeah.
well, it'll be a couple weeks if we do anything
But
tonight.
will we have another chance to speak up here? That's what I'm asking on this. If you approve this tonight to go forward, we won't have another chance to speak. And like I said, I knew this was going on. We didn't have this last week. I don't know why it wasn't. It's dated the 4th. It wasn't up here last week.
It would have been available on our website. I don't know why it wasn't up here
Well, there's
last
just a
week.
lot of information, and I'm not the only one. There'll be some other folks tell you the same thing.
The,
There's just a lot of information to digest on
Yeah,
this.
if we take action on this tonight, either way, you won't get to speak to us again about this.
Yeah, I know this. That's why I asked.
But you'll be able to
postpone
speak
it.
to city council.
Yeah, but I
So-
hope that you maybe postpone it, because I think I brought up some pretty good, you're talking about a lot of land, and it just, just not a good deal. So,
It-
did you have some questions?
Yeah, could I ask a couple of questions?
Sure, you can.
And mainly to clarify, I think I've heard what you've said,
Mhm.
but I want to clarify. On this map that you can see,
Uh-huh.
it's probably on your computer in front of
Uh-huh.
you as well,
Uh-huh.
you can see the parcel outlines, right?
Yes.
So between Bar and Kerr,
Bar and Kerr.
you own the 4 yellow residential
I
parcels.
own everything in the red between Bar and Kerr.
And you own the 4 residential parcels in yellow on the
Okay.
north side of Bar.
Excuse me, I made a mistake. With the proposal, the 2 lots on the other side of the line is my 2 lots. Everything from Blue Line on, the city owns. This way I own. I own all of Bar Avenue properties. And then from Bar Avenue, there's 1 residential lot on the corner of Bar Avenue, all the way down the ditch we own, which is part of this development.
Right,
At some
okay.
time.
That's what
Probably
I'm trying to
good.
clarify.
Yeah.
So you own, between Bar and Kerr, you
Bar
own
and Kerr,
everything outside the blue line.
with the exception, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Oh.
On the very corner, there's that mall.
Of Bar and,
On Kerr Avenue in Cunningham.
oh, of Kerr and Cunningham.
Yeah, and that's
Okay,
one
and
of the
you do not own that?
I know, and that's one of the property owners I referred to as being 3 property owners, City of Urbana,
Okay, all right.
myself, and the owners of that mall.
All right.
And
Now,
that's a pretty good chunk of land to only have 3 property owners, and, if you had 2 of them willing to do something, so.
okay. And you received notification of a rezoning hearing. Is that correct?
We got a letter, yes, sir. Yes,
Okay.
sir.
And what you're saying you had not seen, can you clarify for me what is significant about what you had not seen before tonight?
This whole package.
Okay, but meaning the site plan and those
Site plans,
things?
and then the
Okay,
LaSalle,
all right.
the case on LaSalle, and
Okay.
also showing you, it pretty much, I believe, when this commission forwards this to the council, if it's approved, it gives them the go-ahead, the green light to acquire the other acre
No,
east.
I
think that's in their
I think,
plans.
I think that we are jumping the gun here.
Okay.
What's before this commission
Mm-hmm.
tonight is rezoning the 2 red parcels that are
I
crosshatched
realize that, yes, sir.
inside the red line from commercial to residential,
I don't
which
know.
I understand you oppose.
Mhm.
You would like those to stay commercial and for someone,
Well, that's what it is now, yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
stay commercial.
And
You don't
maybe-
own them, the city does, but you'd
No.
like those parcels to stay commercial.
Actually, I like the other parcels to become business commercial too.
The whole,
The whole thing. That's the way it should be.
what about the 4 residential lots
What for?
on Bar Avenue that are currently zoned R3, I think? You own them,
Yeah.
I own those, yeah,
yes?
yeah.
And
I think it'd just be an excellent way to develop Cunningham Avenue.
And so those you would prefer be zoned commercial as well?
Well, what I'm saying is, I'm up here like you are, we're talking about these 2 lots, okay? We're not talking about that right now. I hadn't gave that any thought, okay?
Okay,
But
that's fine.
I could see where that could happen, because you've got a large area right here. I could see where that happened, but by rezoning, it's not gonna happen. Matter of fact, I think it will take away a lot. And I can tell you, Bar Avenue wouldn't survive. That street wouldn't survive, and so you can eliminate all those houses. We have a hard enough time as it is with that development right down from us. We
Okay.
survived Lakeside Terrace, and I don't know if we can
Okay.
survive this.
Any further questions for Mr. Scott? Mr. Trail?
I want to make sure I understand.
Mhm.
You're saying that rezoning these 2 lots would destroy a substantial commercial value of
Yes.
the remaining commercial area?
Yes.
Because there's
Well, one thing-
imminent development that would
Yes.
require that size?
Yes, and it could be. That's why these other
Well,
lots
I-
east of was.
Could be, but are you saying
Oh, I
that,
have been acquiring these all this land's been acquired over 30 years. I'm telling you, the plans right now, they're gonna be developed. And them 2 lots to the east are gonna be developed too. And that's the
how
plans.
long have they remained as they are
I have
undeveloped?
2 more lots to buy. I'd like to buy them all, and I have 1 more property to buy, and we own the whole thing. Now, you can kind of see the progression here. And certainly those 2 lots to the east is part of that progression of development. I mean,
Any further questions? All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to speak on this at this time? Yeah, you could, feel free to speak your mind.
Hi, my name is Willow Jenkins.
Willa Jenkins, all right.
I live at 406 East Kerr, and I purchased my home almost 18 years ago. I don't know. I think my worry is when you rezone for multifamily, and I look around the corner at Crystal View, as much traffic as the kids come through all the time, and even late at night and things like that, you know. It's just me and my 91-year-old mother that lives there. So once Lakeside was finally demolished, I had a little piece because I didn't have all the traffic from, you know, a lot of people coming through. And then once Crystal View came, again, it started up. And I just worry about if it's, you know, zone multifamily, my property value going down. That's one of my concerns, as well as, you know, just overall being afraid of when large communities come in like that. And it's a multi of people, you know, and there's, I'm sure, as I read, that there should have been a percentage of low income. And usually when low income does come about, that when people transit like that, they never live there long. They may rent for, you know, 3, 4, 5 months, and when they come, they usually come with a lot of baggage. They come down the streets at night, weekends, and they throw bottles. I have all beer bottles and stuff, and that's probably all I have to say about why I would prefer if it was just commercial instead of multifamily.
Just to clarify, I want to catch your address right for the,
406
and that was Bar?
East Kerr.
East Kerr, okay, I'm
Correct.
sorry.
It would be right across the street from you.
Sure, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so when I, you know, you know, if I open my windows, then
Yeah,
everything's
yeah.
there. And that's how it was before that, you know, then I'd stop opening my windows when Lakeside Terrace was there, because, you know, people walk by, they look in, and then you know, it's a lot of the kids, the teenagers, and they would have very nasty things to say, which make me fear. So at night, I didn't go out anymore. But then once it was torn down, for a while, we had the break. And the people at Crystal View are not nearly as bad as what we had at Lakeside. But it seems now that it's getting a little bit more like that. So again, I'm beginning to close my windows in the living room, and I don't go out much at night anymore.
Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Jenkins, Mr. Trail?
So you live on Kerr immediately across the street. You said that
Correct.
your traffic mean not vehicles,
No, no.
not more
People
cars?
traffic.
People cutting through your yard,
Well,
or
I've
just
fenced
people on
mine
the street?
to keep that problem away. I had to put up, you know, my fence, which it's like my property in the back. It goes back about 325 feet. And because people would come from Lakeside Terrace and they cut through right there on the west side, the south side of Kerr that's empty. And they all come through in groups of kids. Excuse me. Then they've turned a lot of that empty lot now into, they play soccer. Then some just come out with balls and throw it. And then there's kids that just come and run through there. And they, you know, they just,
So you don't think development of what's in essence an empty lot would discourage some of that now?
well, I think it would just increase with more people.
Any further questions? Thank you very much.
I'd like to say something.
Sure. Have a seat and state your name if you would.
I'm Dennis Stivers.
Dennis Stivers?
Yeah. I live on Geraldine.
Okay.
5 Geraldine.
Yeah?
And I'm not too thrilled with the idea because you're going to be having low-income housing, and right across is going to be medium-income type housing where people are owning their houses, they're taking care of their places. But what you're talking about putting in there, where people are going to be renting, coming and going. Another thing that would be going on is you're going to be putting a lot of concrete down, putting houses in. We already have a little bit of a problem on Geraldine in the winter with ice and snow. There's some driveways right across from me last winter. You couldn't get in or out of them because they had 3 inches of ice on them.
Is this from poor drainage? Is that what you're
Well,
worried about? That it'll increase the drainage problems?
It's going to increase the drainage problem, yes,
Yeah.
because our area is on a hill,
Mhm.
and it runs down into that road.
Mm-hmm.
And across the street. The corner down there's been more than once when we've had a lot of rain that there's water standing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know about that. I presume that the drainage will be sufficient on his property. The city has taken a look at it, but I'm no expert on that stuff. But I know these plans are reviewed by the city engineer, and I would hope that they wouldn't make it so that it wouldn't make your problem worse.
Mm-hmm.
Anything
Any
else?
questions?
Or any questions for Mr. Stivers? Mr. Hopkins?
Quick clarification for me. So Geraldine is the street,
It's
the first north-south
yeah.
street west of Cunningham?
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else care to address the Plan Commission on this at this time? In that case, I'll close the public input for tonight, and we'll go into discussion. Discussion? Anybody have any thoughts?
I had a question.
Ms. Bynum?
For in the comprehensive plan future land use, are they want this area to be mixed residential?
According to the future land use map, yes.
So,
In fact, these two properties and then the properties just, on the comprehensive plan, the properties just to the west of that are also in the mixed residential shaded area.
okay, well, yeah, I guess
Okay.
I was just wondering because
Sure, just for clarification, yeah.
yeah, so it's commercial now, but in the future, it's
According to the land use map,
yeah,
yes.
they want it to all be mixed residential.
Yes.
Okay.
Further questions or discussion? It's kind of quiet up here. I don't know about the rest of you, but I think I'd like to think about it. I like the development. I'm sure that it'll be done with, all due care and be a nice development. The issues of this street and these houses being landlocked is an interesting issue for me. The commercial frontage on that Mr. Bart talked about, I think is I think it's probably still viable, but those 4 houses tucked back in there. It's an interesting question that I hadn't really. I thought about it somewhat. I went down the street and looked at it, but I hadn't really thought about just what that would mean to be caught back in on that dead-end street. So, I don't know what I think about it, and that's just for me for now. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts or similar thoughts or completely different thoughts. Ms. Bynum?
I feel like it conforms with what is planned for the future in that area, for it to all be mixed residential. And it seems like they've brought this proposal to the city before in the past, and the city was wanting to move forward with it. I don't know. I mean, I feel like there's a need for that type of housing in the community, and I like that that they have vouchers for veterans, homeless veterans. I think that's an important thing to have. I mean, so I would feel comfortable with it, but I do understand that there are some concerns.
Thank you. Mr. Storr.
Thank you. Ms. Bindum's remark about the homes for veterans had something that I had circled myself. I'm a little concerned about the density of the houses. I share this lady's concerns about intensive development and multifamily, and I have some concerns that there's not very much open space here. I realize that this kind of has an impact on the overall notion of the rezoning, and I favor continuing the case.
Thank you, Mr. Storr. Mr. Fell.
Can somebody from city staff tell me how long ago the city purchased these lots?
The lots were purchased in 2004.
And what was I'll say the condition of that purpose? Were they put on the market and the city bought them?
There is a document that pertains to that. I would have to research that. But they were purchased from Mr. Scott Plunk. It was in 2004. At the time, they were 401.5 and 403 East Kerr. I'm not totally sure what the conditions were or what the conditions were, but that was the nature of the arrangement.
I was frankly just wondering if they were on the open marketplace, so any developer that wanted to purchase them could do so?
I can't answer that question right now.
Further discussion or commentary, Mr. Trail? Or Mr. Fell, were you, I'm sorry, did you have that on? Mr. Trail?
I think there's general community interest in not allowing land, it's essentially, this is very urban land, to be held undeveloped, even if there might potentially be a long-term use of some kind. If it's not happening, and you do have uses that are appropriate for the area and whatever, I think you're serving a municipal purpose by allowing land to be developed. If you have people willing to develop it and it's an appropriate use, I don't really see any problem with rezoning it. Holding it as commercial sort of implies to me that we have this idea that there would be a sort of large parking lot commercial development along that part of Cunningham, and I'm just not sure that's in the city's plans. So I don't necessarily see this as a problem. I agree that the issues with the landlocked houses along Bar, but that's sort of a general problem with, and this one would contribute to that, which would be allowing developments that don't have contiguous streets that go through. That there's no plan for making the street map here more rational. Now, certainly, if it's the city's plan, for instance, to in the long term, purchase one of those lots along Bar and continue the street that you see running through this so that it connects with Bar, that would be a good thing. Although I think if they were planning that, they could have arranged for that when Crystal View was built to extend Bar to. So I don't know how you can, what potential there is for the long term to really rationalize the street map or do anything about those houses. They're getting pretty hemmed in at this point.
Yeah, we're and again, we don't have a site plan to, or any of that, where this is a straight rezone. The future land use map that Ms. Bynum mentioned does say, encourage a physical development pattern that ties new streets into the existing network to become part of the overall built neighborhood. If there was more than one way in and out of there, to me, it would be more appealing.
Yeah, the other important aspect about the one you're pointing out is that the commercial future land use is really it says community business, which I interpret as being relatively small business along that area. So I'm not sure that maintaining deep commercial zoning well into to what's otherwise predominantly residential is necessarily in line with the long-term plan.
Ms. Bynum, did you have something?
Again, I was just thinking, well, if the comprehensive plan wants it to be mixed residential and we have an opportunity to rezone it to conform to that, I don't see a strong case to why we would want to keep it as commercial.
It's a good point. Thank you. Mr. Hopkins first, and then Mr. Betcher.
Tactics and strategy. We have a meeting next week.
We do.
We do, however, have concerns about quorum. We need everyone who has not responded yet to say they can make it.
For next week.
That's correct.
Okay, so we don't know whether we have a meeting next week. Which makes it slightly more difficult. But I think a couple of things that Ms. Bynum has pointed out lead me to look for an opportunity in the short term to get this right. And I don't think we've got it quite right. And it's already been brought up that I think what should happen here is we should follow the other piece of this and see if we can connect Bar Avenue, get a more reasonable street layout from this new development proposal, which solves site planning problems we're talking about, and would also leave a reasonable commercial front, or could anyway, on
Cunningham
Avenue. And excuse me, it would seem that some of the parties who have been energized to the table by this rezoning request are precisely the parties that need to be involved to work that out. And I don't know whether there's time and whatever to work that out. And that may not even affect whether what decision we make on this particular rezoning. But it seems to me it would be sad to miss the opportunity to do this better by sort of having got some people to the table. And I don't know exactly how to do that. I was hoping that if we knew we were going to have a meeting on the 18th, that we could do some quick rethinking and meet the deadlines and urgencies that I understand are involved to get this project and grant going forward. So maybe we've got 7 of 8. Can we take a poll of who's going to be here next week? Or would
That would help.
All right, I'll call for a straw poll. If you're certain you're going to be here, raise your hand. If you're somewhat certain that you're going to be, so the rest of you are not sure.
And so even with,
Yeah.
so even if Danny's here, that's only 4.
Yeah, right.
So we don't have a
Don't know.
Okay.
All right.
So, I would make the following motion and explain it.
Okay.
I move that we send case number 2258 M15 to City Council with a recommendation for approval. And if I get a second, I'll explain strategy.
Moved by Mr. Hopkins, second by Ms. Bindum.
Okay, so and this is partly because the Plan Commission is going to be able to meet, but it would go before the council on what day?
Because of the previous delay, we were hoping to make council meeting on Monday, the 15th.
Which is Monday.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I would encourage the parties, the landowning parties in this case, to consider the possibility, which actually probably wouldn't modify the zoning that we're proposing, of configuring a more effective configuration of ownership so that the housing proposal could have 2 exits, which I think would decrease the effect on Kerr Avenue. If it also had an exit through Bar, would resolve many of the issues of 4-stranded residential R3 zone parcels at the end of Bar Avenue, which visually, on a configuration makes no sense.
Mhm.
And would enable at least as good a project from Homestead's point of view, I believe, to go forward. And so I think under the circumstances, the rezoning, and I also think that rezoning the 2 parcels we propose does not dramatically, I don't have dimensions in front of me, but the depth of the commercial that would still be there is significantly greater than what's there now as commercial development. And I think it's still viable as commercial development, which I think should be there. But the edges between these things at the moment are just all wrong.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a clarification question so that we make sure we understand the direction?
Yes, Ms. Pearson.
Thank you. Is the suggestion that the city or the development team work with the property owner to the south who is in the audience to acquire land in order to put in an access point to Bar Avenue? Is that what the suggestion is?
I don't know how far to go in explaining the suggestion. That would certainly be the starting point. but I think it could go even farther to an exchange of the, well, just as an example, okay? This is a lousy way to negotiate. But there are 2 red parcels up there being rezoned. The eastern one of those for 3 or all 4 of the ones to the south would allow a double-loaded homestead development to go through and be connected at both ends. Now, that may be of no interest to Homestead, no interest to other property owners, but it's sort of like sitting here looking at it and saying, all these little layout problems we were fiddling with, all this little question about a single loaded, everything unloading onto Kerr Avenue to the north across from single-family housing trapped at the end of Bar that doesn't make any sense and is too deep for commercial and won't make sense for a converted use. It's all right there.
Can I ask, are the 4 parcels, are they owner occupied? They're not, they're rental units?
I don't know. Do you, anybody, if you know, yeah. Yeah. The 4 that are residentially zoned?
No, I'm sorry, no, those are
Rental houses, rental houses. Great. Great, thank you. Well, to me, I've watched half my neighborhood flip from rental owned to owner occupied, so, you know, I don't think that matters.
Well, the point is those 4 are trapped.
That matters. I agree.
Well, and the fact that these are rental units owned by a single owner, I think,
Well,
gives you the
'cause
possibility.
I'm not going to speak for the.
But in terms of a zoning decision, which is what we're
That's
being
right,
asked
that's
to
right.
do, we could, I think it's, to us, is either approve it, saying it makes sense to do, and I would tend to argue to do it simply because we have a useful development ready to go and would go if we proceeded with the rezoning, as opposed to a potential something maybe that hasn't been happening.
That doesn't fit the comprehensive plan use.
The
The potential, you know, if it was to be made commercial.
I depend. I mean, would an office, you know? I mean, I for future things we don't. I mean, you know, it's kind of tough to. I just say we're being asked to make it zoning. I mean, whether we do it either way, if the parties got together and made a swap, wouldn't it simply? And if that was then incompatible with the zoning, in the new circumstances, wouldn't they simply come back and say, "Hey guys, we want you to zone it differently again"?
Maybe. Any further discussion?
I guess I would
Mr.
just say
Hopkins?
that's part of the logic of why I'm saying, even though I think we could do this better than the immediate proposals, I think we should go ahead and approve or recommend approval of this rezone. You've stated the logic much more clearly than I did.
But I do agree. What you're saying, I think, is somewhere in there we think is a better solution. We'd love to encourage the parties to go away and come up with a better solution, then come back to us with another zoning request, perhaps. But right now, I think this is what we have to work with today.
Well, Mr. Storr?
I would have supported Lou's proposal when I came in, but I'm not so sure right now. And I sure hate to see the loss of commercial property if it might be or business property if it might be put to that use. And the problem of having an only one road in and into a dense development, which seems like doesn't have very much open space, or not as much as I'd like to see. All that, I think, I would prefer to consider that for till another meeting, till the next time when we can consider this.
Thank you. Mr. Hopkins?
So you're saying you want to put off making a decision on this?
Yes.
Okay, as I understand, the difficulty is that Homestead is trying to put in a grant application. And the grant application is due on July 1? No.
Actually, we have to put in an application for federal home loan bank funding, and part of that requires that the zoning be conformity. That application is due June 26th.
Okay, sorry, I was giving, I was not giving you full credit for urgency. But, so what, going back to the sort of circuitous logic here, by sending this to council with a recommendation for approval, the rezoning can occur. The application can be made based on a proposal that's already highly developed. And we can have gone on record as saying there's a better way. Get it together, folks. And that can happen in parallel, I think. That, and obviously I may be wrong, but that's the logic that I understand of the situation we're in.
Anything further? Well, either we vote or we don't, so I'm open. Mr. Fell?
Well, I think while we're having a discussion,
You're right.
For Mr. Storr, the concept of open space and all those kind of things they'll have to conform to the zoning ordinance. So if they don't meet the open space requirements now, they'll have to in their final development. So there are zoning requirements for a certain amount of open space, and if they don't meet it on this site plan, they'll have to. They'll have to change it to meet that, so.
That brings up another clarification. Will this go through as a PUD when it's at that stage?
All indications are that they were going to try to meet the zoning requirements. There are some tweaks, as noted, that need to happen to do that, but it is our understanding that the intent is to meet the by right requirements. So no PUD.
For R4?
Correct. Of course,
Okay.
Things could change with the applicant team, but that's our
Right.
understanding.
Thanks.
Do they conform to the R4 requirements as submitted?
According to the current proposal, there are a few sections of the plan that don't necessarily conform, a few yards that are a few feet short, but for the most part, the plan does generally conform to the R4 district.
And I should also point out, as noted earlier, this is just a conceptual drawing to attach to the application. Most of the engineering and the detail work has not yet been provided to us.
All right. Well, there's a motion on the table. Roll call. Let's do a roll call.
All right, we're going to mix it up, and I'm going to call. I'm going to call the roll from over here. Mr. Buttrey?
Yes.
Ms. Bindum?
Yes.
Mr. Fell?
Yes.
Mr. Fitch?
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Storr?
No.
And Mr. Trail?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Motion passes, and I guess you're shooting for the city council on Monday, the 15th?
That's correct.
All right. So thank you all for your input. We don't have any old business. There are 2 public hearings on the back that I understand have already been continued.
Yes, currently scheduled for June 18th, but apparently we will not have a quorum for that date. So I would welcome
Yeah.
suggestions.
Okay. Well, hopefully something will happen and we will have a quorum, but
Well, we know we're not going to on the 18th, right?
Well, how many do we have? How many did we do?
Mr. Storr, we need you to commit in order to determine if there's.
If I'm needed, I'll make a point of coming.
there are two cases on here that are, right now, are already continued to June 18th. And we're worried that we won't have a quorum on the 18th.
But now it sounds like we will.
No, I don't. No, we still don't.
Still don't?
Nope.
Well, who do you think?
Based on the information I've received today, Mr. Fitch, Mr. Hopkins, you responded you were able to make it next week.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Fell, did you raise your hand earlier?
I may have to be in Chicago.
Okay, I strike that then, I'm sorry.
So-
I don't know yet. I'll know tomorrow. So I can let you know.
And Ms. Bynum, you said you were able to make it, and Mr. Storr with arm wrestling. So then, Mr. Fell, it's all up to you.
Thanks.
Can we have, I don't know, rules for that, but can we have another special meeting with that?
I can meet the following.
If everyone can commit to that, we could at least see if there's availability to that. If you were to announce that date at this meeting, if you think you're able to make it, that will also help with notification of the public.
I'm not sure what we're trying to do.
Well, we've got these two continued public hearings on
And
the
another
back.
hearing that has been advertised
Yeah.
for an annexation agreement.
Yeah, for next week. And so we're trying to see, can everyone let, with as much certainty as you can you let city staff know tomorrow whether you'd be available on the 27th, or 25th, I'm sorry.
If we do know tomorrow, then we can put it on the agenda that goes out, and that is helpful for notification.
I know I can't make the 25th. Oh, no, wait a minute. Wait a minute. No, I can make the 25th.
I can make the 25th. I prefer that.
I can be there on the 25th.
I'm in.
I think I'm in.
So we're going to try to have meetings on the 18th and the 25th?
I think, it looks like the 18th's not happening.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's why we're doing this. So, and it's up to Mr. Otto then.
I'm sorry, Mr. Buttrey, do you know on the 25th yet?
You guys need to cancel your vacations.
I believe Mr. Otto is out of town until mid-July.
So we have, what do we got?
We're at 4 again.
I have 4 on my list: Storr, Bynum, Fitch, maybe Fell. Who am I missing for the 25th? Hopkins, you are able?
25th, yeah.
Oh,
I can do the
that's a
25th.
quorum then, if Andrew's for sure.
But you could also do the 18th possibly, is that what you
Me,
said?
I think not.
Oh,
I
okay.
think probably not.
Okay, all right.
I will also take this opportunity for anyone watching in the audience. We do have a vacancy on this very commission. We would welcome your throwing your name in the hat. Thank you.
Absolutely. Seriously, if you have a good candidate and want to make a recommendation to city staff, and forward it to the mayor, the mayor gets to decide, then the council, but, huh?
Yes.
Hopefully a female.
Yeah, you've been outnumbered for a while since Bernadine and Marilyn. Okay. I'm sorry. Well, thanks for that. We don't have any audience participation, assume. Staff report? No staff report, no study session. Therefore, we're adjourned.